and then arriving at a place where I'm like, the stillness has to be in me. Like, no, there will always be rocks being thrown in my pond, right? And so it's to be able to allow those to flow over while keeping your heart open.
Hello, and welcome to the Conscious Communion podcast, where we traverse through the inner dwellings of the human experience through conversation. I'm your host, Danae. Join me as we explore the interconnection of creativity and community.
Andrew Riggs is creating a new paradigm where men no longer suffer alone, creating and co-leading mandate a men's circle to reclaim balance in our true nature. Andrew emboldens men to find wholeness in the masculine and the divine feminine to reclaim the birthright. We, as spiritual beings living a human experience, are here to awaken. Specializing in inner child relationships, the father wound, shadow work, and sacred sexuality, Andrew offers his service in collaboration with Mandate as well as one-on-one mentorships. I'm so thrilled to have Andrew here today for a deep dive into his work and how it began. Andrew, welcome.
Thanks for sharing breath before that and that sweet intro. It's so interesting to listen to and be like, yeah, that feels right. And also there's so much more, right? It's been such sweet work, and I'm so grateful for this time and to have found my way to you.
I'm so grateful. Yes, we met about a year ago, and it's just been this beautiful interweaving of so many living, breathing conversations that feel so here for us in the here and now, but also that feel like ancient medicine that we've always known, that our ancestors have known, and that we get to remember and reclaim as, again, our birthright. And so I know that you've done so much work to unveil that for yourself, right? This is how you're doing this work, and this is how you're sharing this work in a holistic way, because you've gone to the places, you've gone to the depths to then uncover what it means to share this work with others. So would you be willing to just share a little bit of insight on that journey and what it's looked like for you to unveil and unearth this iteration of Andrew?
Yeah. Obviously that's a journey.
It is.
Maybe a podcast of its own. But stepping into men's work has been really organic for me. I think that, as we as individuals find our medicine, as we refer to it sometimes, our gifts, I believe, are buried deeply in the specific wounding that we have. At least that's what I've found for myself, and I've heard that reflected in so many other stories. And so for me, stepping into men's work was really about reclaiming my masculinity but more specifically working through and shedding the shame around being a man and stepping into a new paradigm where I could write a new story than the story that I was given from birth. Raised like so many others through a tremendous amount of trauma, and really, like, I spent all of my energy being like, I'm not going to be like those men that I witnessed hurt people in so many ways. And so I was so focused on that, I wasn't focused on my own direction or what I wanted to deliver into the world. And, it's ironic, this actually just came to me right now, but I look back and I see the pain and the suffering and the damage done at the hands of these deeply wounded men who never had an opportunity to heal. And I was like them. And this really just like clicked for me right in this moment. Like, I was a deeply wounded man who never had the opportunity to heal. And one day the story broke up and I woke up and I'm like, I have to find another way. Um, because where I was so unbearable, so untenable, so unproductive and destructive in its own ways that, yeah, that couldn't exist anymore. Um, and so I started down the path of men's work, not knowing what it was or what it would be. Just it kind of felt like the only thread of hope or direction that I had at the time, and it's just like bloomed into this beautiful journey that is my own. And I feel super fortunate to get to interact with so many other men along the way that are helping co-create these new stories that we're trying to birth into the world and into our own lives.
Mm. Which then impacts so many others, right? The rippling effect of sacred leadership in the world. I think that we've seen such a compromise in men who haven't sat with themselves and given themselves the space to sacredly feel their wounds. Yeah. They've been ashamed. They've been afraid, fearful, mostly ashamed, though. You brought that up earlier, and I think that that's really interesting that story was regurgitated because of our forefathers and mothers and all the people and ancestors that came before us, that it wasn't okay for us to be working through and moving through and honoring these hard things that we go through in this life. Yeah. And so to look at it and to look at it with love is really what I see you doing. I see you honoring it and loving it, and by utilizing so many beautiful modalities to then uncover what that looks like to live like in a wholesome way, and then to show other men to do the same is just really, really sweet. And I cherish it because I already know some of the men that you have impacted, and it's impacted not only them as individuals, but also their relationships.
Yeah,
which is huge.
It's been beautiful to get to witness. And, I struggle really with this idea that I have anything to do with it. I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything. Don't look at me over here. Don't give me any credit. And I think part of that's my own worthiness wounding. And part of it is like, I really do see it as this co-creation, right? And so maybe I'm permissioning or offering a space or offering friendship or mentorship, but like these men are saying yes to this new story, and I can't do that. And I think the shame is the big part of it. I think under the current patriarchal structure and the leadership structure and all of this paradigm that we're operating from, I believe that myself and men are put in a position, you spoke to wholeness, we're put in a position where to be men in a patriarchal society, we have to deny our feminine nature. And so we're existing in life in a paradigm where we're having to deny and be ashamed of half of who we are. And we carry that from birth forward. And so working to reintegrate and learn to re-love and to listen to and witness and reintegrate that divine feminine that is within all of us, really is throws in the face this whole, throws out this whole story, and it's scary work. It's really, really challenging. It takes a tremendous amount of courage, and we talk as men about how important courage is, but like, to me, that's courage. And so really celebrating these courageous men showing up to doing this work, alongside with me, because I'm just one of so many. And in a world with not a lot of hope right now is what I feel, that gives me tremendous hope.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I think that is hope. That is the epitome of hope when a world that we've known for so long gets to be rewritten. And when you get to do it in community and know that that impact is reaching far and wide because of your humility and because of your willingness to say yes to the divine and to what the divine is calling forth, that in itself is really, that's the offering. And you're offering it back to, you know, the mother, the father, the holy essence of the great mystery. And it's just, it's really, it's a privilege to watch you continue to follow the thread.
Yeah. The one thing I've realized in the reintegration of that feminine and tapping back into that intuition is my ability to see that thread now. And I couldn't see it before. I couldn't, that my ability to tap into that and listen and to really be with those subtle calls didn't exist, and doing so required getting quiet, which meant sitting with myself, right? Which is scary and hard to do. It's so exciting now to be in a place where I feel like I'm living a life of devotion, and it is devotion to following that thread, following that intuition, stepping through fear and self-doubt and all the noise in our heads, you know? It's been such a gift.
Absolutely. And to continue to show up and to say yes when the intuition comes, because obviously it's not always going to be there. I think that's a beautiful part of creativity and creation and co-collaborating with the divine. It's knowing that there will be seasons where that thread may not feel like there's a lot of leeway on the other end. But to know that in silence and in your devotion, again, to trusting the holy unknown, and even in the waiting periods, there's so much to learn in those waiting periods. And I know for you, it's been this, you've done the work and you've had to reintegrate and you've had to sit and it's this dance. So I'm curious if you could shed a little bit of light, because everyone's process is so different, what your process has been to alchemize the shadow and all that you've been through. And then again, just trust the holy unknown to just do the next thing.
Yeah. The first word that comes to me right now is safety. And so for me, it was really important. And when I'm working with others, I think it's really important to address the immediate safety concerns. And I don't mean like external physical safety, though maybe that's a risk. But to be able to get quiet and listen, it was important for me to feel safe enough in my own psyche and my own body to get quiet. And so there's like trauma work. And I mean, there's layers and layers and layers of trauma work, right? I mean, being alive is traumatic, and it's the ultimate wound in some ways. So there's the loud things. There's the loud things that were making my nervous system spin. And so really working through in like traditional psychology to understand it in my mind, and then really through breath work and psychedelic work to somatically process those things, which wasn't happening in traditional psychology for me. I could rationalize anything, but it was stuck in my body. And so my body was still in this fight or flight response, even though rationally I knew that I was safe. And so I had to go through the work, and I'm still actively and will for the rest of my life probably be doing the work to heal those loud traumas, to feel safe enough in my own body and confident enough, and to know that I had me, that my foundation was solid, so that I could get quiet. I had this visualization for a long time. I kept drawing cards, like archetype cards before psychedelic journeys, and I drew the card the heart like 7 times in a row. And I kept having these journeys of sitting in the middle of a pond, in the middle of a cave, which was the center of my heart. And I have kids, and I would get so frustrated because the kids would come like throw a rock in my pond, and I'd just be like, stop throwing rocks in my pond. I want it to be still, right? And then arriving at a place where I'm like, the stillness has to be in me. Like, no, there will always be rocks being thrown in my pond, right? And so it's to be able to allow those to flow over while keeping your heart open, and just like really surrendering to those waves and finding that stillness. And to do that, I had to work through all those loud traumas first. And that was the scary stuff. And now it's like, ooh, this little thread. Now it's demanding, right? A path of devotion is demanding, and can be scary, but very different than trauma work in my experience. Yeah.
Definitely. That sounds so similar to my own experience with the safety piece. And I think so many of us that do this work that follow the holy unknown to the thread to see what lies on the other side. It really is that for so many of us, especially when we've been through a lot of trauma. And I myself felt like I had to reintegrate my divine feminine because I lived most of my life in a very masculine way. Mm-hmm. And so I can fully empathize with that feeling of not knowing what intuition could feel like, and not knowing how to trust myself when intuition would even come in the very beginning phases of it coming, right? And like staying open and trusting your heart and all of it. It's so multifaceted. And to really just, when you get the aha feeling in your cells and your DNA, and you're like, okay, I actually feel safe to receive this information, and now I can move forward or be here now. More importantly, be here now in the present moment to then be open to what the divine is sharing so that I can share it with others if that's the call.
Yeah. I hear it's interesting to me, this reintegration of the feminine. You know, I think it's easy as a man to be like, oh, the women have it figured out. Like there's so much wounding that the feminine endures. But I'm like, but more and more in talking to women like, yourself and others, our culture seems to me in large to be pushing this like anti-masculinity, anti-man, like boss bitch narrative of like, oh, and so by really, encouraging and empowering women to really embody that masculine is also this quieting and this rejection of the feminine. And so it's really interesting to me to think about that we're in some ways collectively reintegrating the feminine, not just like, oh, men need to do this work, but we collectively are stepping into a space where the feminine has been neglected in culturally, communally, collectively for so long. And so it feels like there's this like, I think it is a desperate need, but this like collective wave of energy towards that reintegration together and finding ways. I do men's work, but I'm really curious about working in co-ed spaces, and I'm not sure how to really hold that yet. It feels much much more risky, I guess, in some ways to me. Um, but the work of healing and reparations and reintegration and honoring of the feminine is ultimately work that we all, I don't want to say all, but, collectively need to do. Um, and at some point in time, I hope we can get to a space as men where we're a safe enough container to hold space in community, in balance, not with the feminine, but with women, to really step in and hold that reintegration and celebrate it too. Because, men, I think, have spent a lot of time dominating over, not holding space for, and taking advantage of, or trying to smother out those beautiful feminine gifts. And there's just so much collective healing that needs to happen there to birth this new story.
1,000%. I kept, as you were sharing that, and I know the relationship that you have to the earth, obviously not intimately, because that's so personal. And also I know your deep respect I know the deep respect that you have for the earth. And so I believe that so much of our relationship to the feminine has a lot to do with the detachment that we've been fed for centuries upon end, unfortunately, to not come into real awareness, somatically, emotionally, physically, all the things, that we belong to the earth, and that we are the earth's caregivers, and it's a reciprocal act. The earth cares for us, and we need to care for her. And so it's when we forgot to take care of the earth as a species, I think that there was a huge detachment, and that's so much of what we're seeing now is this, okay, this awakening. Okay, it's time. We need to take care of the earth so we can take care of each other. And so much of that is the inner work that we're doing ourselves as humans.
Yeah, for sure. Mother Earth has been, obviously, provides us everything, including our lives. But sorry, I'm kind of all over the place in my head for a moment there. But what was really coming through for me in that is this sense of like losing our own, losing track of our own divinity. Right. I envision a past world where people knew that they were divine beings innately, like, yes, we are divine beings and everything around us is divine. And in losing our divinity, to witness or acknowledge the divinity in somebody else, but not feel that within ourselves, feels so heartbreaking that our, I think, a natural response is to either steal the divinity away, right, in this dominance culture that we live in, right? We either steal the divinity away and try to take it for ourselves, or we try to crush the divinity because we can't bear witnessing it because we're unable to witness our own divinity. And so I think that it's, in rebuilding our relationship and recognizing and reclaiming our own divinity, I think it becomes impossible to deny the divinity that we see around us. And in witnessing that divinity, how can you then desecrate that without breaking your own heart?
Yes. A deep resounding yes. Yeah. It's The more we have grace and mercy for ourselves, because let's be real, we are our own worst critics. And so, right? And talk about shame. We so often, and we don't often realize when we're stuck in those loops that we're creating our own suffering.
Yeah.
Because we're so caught up in it. We're caught up in the drama. We were talking about this earlier before we hit record. And I think that it's so fascinating that you mentioned yourself that this is something that you've been noticing. And I too myself, it's something that I've been noticing in my own cycle. It's that I'm rewriting the script. I'm changing the paradigm. Like, let's go. I saw my family do it. I no longer want to choose this path. I no longer want to hold on to the suffering. And when we let go of the suffering, we're able to see that we are divine beings.
Yeah. Yeah. And we get to see that so is everybody else.
1,000%. That's the mirror, right? Yeah. When we get to see it in ourselves, I think that's because it's so challenging to see it in ourselves. It's so much more for me, and I'm not sure about for you, but for so long, it was so much easier to look at my neighbor and be like, wow, what a divine, beautiful creature you are.
Yeah.
And then when I'd look in the mirror for myself, there was self-loathing, there was shame, there was guilt. And it didn't really click for me until I really started to go through those nasty shadows to then be able to really see, even in some of the most gruesome circumstances, to know that that person doesn't know their divinity.
Yeah.
They don't know their divinity. And I know that that's a big concept for a lot of folks. And also, what does it look like to have grace for everyone?
Yeah.
It's a hard topic to talk about.
Yeah. And I mean, so much of my deep wounding through witnessing all of those men that, did atrocious things, and being able to get to that place where I'm like, those were wounded men that never had a chance to heal, and my heart breaks for them, which doesn't mean that what they did was okay, but I can hold both of those realities. And so in that having compassion for them and their deeply wounded, broken hearts, and having compassion ourselves as the recipients of or committers of acts, then grace can exist. Grace has room to be. And the self-love part, I just got back from a 7-day breathwave retreat, and I have this beautiful relationship with my inner child, but I treat him as separate from me. And so I give so much love and doting and care to this inner child. And during this breath session, I just melded, and I was like, that's me. And really the first time I can give me love, but man, it's hard. But something that was said during the session, and I don't mean this in a traditional Christian sense at all, but a story was told about arriving at the gates of heaven and being like, I'm here. And they're like, yay, welcome. You're so welcome here. I have one question for you. Do you love yourself? All that's required to enter heaven is that you love yourself. And it might just be the hardest thing to do. And I believe, if you want to talk about this very meta level, what is our collective purpose to come into these human bodies and live these human lives and suffer, is to learn to love ourselves and see ourselves for what we truly are, and stepping into all the turmoil and all the trial. And this goes back to me saying our gifts come from those hardest experiences, right? And that's really hard to see when you're in it. But once you're out of it and you've worked through it, it's undeniable to me in my experience that it had to be that hard for me to learn the things that I needed to be so that I could be the man that I am today, and learn to tap into that intuition and follow that truth and start to reclaim that divinity and start to learn to love myself. It had to be. And truly, I'm grateful. And I don't mean that in like I'm trying to be like, better than, or, all's love and light. Like, no, it is a dirty, messy, hard place. But if you can stand in your shadow while your knees shake and take a breath and keep your heart open, it's really all for us. Hero's journey, go into the dark places, shine light in the corners, and find your treasure.
Before, when I was praying earlier today, just kind of leaning into our conversation and seeing what came up. The hero's journey was something that came up very loud. So I love that you just said that. Spirit just said the hero's journey. And I was like,
yeah,
okay, I don't know when that's going to come through. I know it will. And here we are.
Yeah. I mean, it's that over and over, can I share just this little piece about one of my breath sessions?
Yes.
I had a really hard day and a half and was able to drop into my breath really well. And I had drawn the card, the threshold, like the threshold of the doorway, breaking through. And I was really in my intuition, and I could see the golden thread leading me through the doorway. And I had to give up everything. I give up my relationship. I give up my friends. I give up my children. I give up my life in devotion to this path, in this breath space. I have no idea what's on the other side of this threshold, but I'm going to step through. And it's terrifying. And in stepping through, I arrived back fully, consciously in the moment of that breath circle with everybody there, and realized that I was in heaven. I just didn't realize it. And that it's that hero's journey of saying, I'm scared, I may be obliterated, but I'm devoted to discovering the fullness that I can be. And so I'm going to take that step. And we're here. And that may not sound very profound in my articulation of it, but I really believe that stepping forward with courage, being willing to break the story that we've carried our entire life about who we're supposed to be or what we're supposed to be, and let that fall away and become what we actually are, is a courageous act of love and faith and true devotion to ourselves. And that's the hero's journey. And we have a new opportunity every single day of our lives to be reborn in that way. Yeah. It's beautiful and scary work.
Truly. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. It's, and yet the scary work while having hope isn't so scary. It's really interesting how the more you say yes, the less fear binds you to whatever attachment is outside of you.
Yeah.
knowing that the safety starts here that's vital work. That's vital work. And it's work. It is work to feel, to like feel in your mind, body, your spirit. The body piece for me, it sounds like for you as well, was really challenging. Like there would be times where I was like, I know this cognitively, psychologically, I know this. And yet, why does my body feel like it's going to jump out of, like, my heart feels like it wants to leave my body at this moment? And it took so much practice to lean into the breath, to feel into it, and to just welcome it, welcome the feeling, and just love it. To just, find the new rhythm to attune to. Really, that's it. It's attuning to the new rhythm that wants to be rewritten within your vessel.
Yeah. Well, the body keeps the score or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
the rationalization piece is great, but I think part of this current patriarchal culture really prioritizes like logic. Um, and in a paradigm where we're not divine beings, we're just like these animals walking around that have bigger brains than everybody else, and we think that that's makes us extra special, which it does in so many ways. Yeah, the amount of trauma that's stored subconsciously in the body doesn't go anywhere. And I kind of wonder, I'm not sure, but I feel like you don't even really need to do the mind part. I don't think it has to be mind and then body. I think that it has to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting through that initial, building that foundation within yourself to be able to stand in that and let that energy flow and to feel all the things that you're going to feel. Yeah, it's hard work, but that somatic experience of release, I think, is the truest letting go. Because I can rationalize something and be like, okay, I don't need to be mad about that, but I'm still carrying it. Yeah, it's been such an interesting journey, and the different somatic modalities, which I'm not particularly versed in. I've seen, TRE be really impactful for a lot of people, particularly women in my experience, but I know a few men that it's been really impactful for. But in a lot of my psychedelic journeys, whether I'm coming back into my body after having left or like reintegrating some learning, that feels like a very somatic experience to me. I'm not cognitively learning. I'm like cellularly learning, reprogramming this new way of being. Maybe like in the way that the Gene Keys talks about it, right? Like you're at this low frequency and then your frequency increases. And I feel like that's actually happening in my body through like tremors or other sort of really big somatic releases. I really think that that's like, this is our mind, like this is our brain, right? But like, this is our mind, and it's our spiritual body existing in this like 3D human realm. Yeah, I'm curious, if there's any particular, I know that you've done quite a bit of breath work, but any other particular somatic modalities that you've found to be really helpful for
TRE.
you? With TRE?
TRE has been huge, but dancing is,
Okay.
dancing for me is somatic medicine at its finest. It really is. Last Saturday, pretty sure that's where I got my little cold. I had so much fun. I went out and I went dancing, and I just had so much fun. Like it was play, but I also got into stretching a little bit. Like my back felt a little tight and like so I started to stretch and like there's no rhyme or reason that needs to be followed or abide. Like if I want to shake, I'm going to shake. Like
Yeah.
ecstatic dance can be so powerful in that way and you can create that for yourself in the comfort of your own home or out
Yeah.
with community. And that can be really juicy, like doing it in both places. You know, you could literally just turn on some tunes that feel good for you and get moving.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I
Mm.
also love to dance, and it's going to, public places like ecstatic dances is a really interesting way for me to face my own shame and self-judgment because whew, it gets loud. And so being like, oh, I'm just going to listen to my intuition, move, flow, stretch, whatever it is, and just sit with that self-judgment that it's just funny because like nobody cares.
Totally.
But I do.
Totally. It's it's a practice, right? Like I
Yeah.
think even for me, the past few times I have gone out in public to dance, I have been sober. And there I've realized that the times that I've gone to go dance sober, the first time was really uncomfortable and I was watching my mind and it was judging itself. The second time I was like, oh, this is the most fun I've ever had because there's nothing that's up here and I'm
Mm,
just fully in my body. But it
mm,
took practice for me to get there, right? Like, I don't care if I look weird right now. This feels good in my body. So, whatever. Like,
yeah.
I don't really care if I look like I'm on beat or if I'm moving rhythmically. Like, this feels good for me here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
no, go ahead.
I wonder, something that's been really helpful for me is um, in those vulnerable spaces, and especially through dance. I also love to wrestle. It just feels so like masculine and so embodied. I did jujitsu for a while and stuff, which is fine. But to like wrestle with friends and just play in that way and be really physical also feels, yeah, it feels like body presence and play, and it needs to be safe. Um, but taking a moment, taking a pause, I have this visual of me at, I'm about 2 years old and I'm wearing Tonka truck overalls and I have like a straw blonde hair and a bowl cut and pool chalk on my nose. And that's like my little buddy. And we make faces at each other. And when I do like cold plunges, I envision him and I'm like, you ready? That's good. And so like taking a quick pause and inviting that version of me to come and dance really helps me feel free to play in a way that I don't necessarily feel permission due to my conditioning as a 41-year-old man. Um, and so granting that part of me permission to come out and just be alive really helps. I'm not saying it goes away, but really helps quiet that self-judgment.
Thank you for sharing that. I think having that visual of our inner child and the child that was us, right? It's and
Mm-hmm.
melding the past with the present and our future, right? Like merging all timelines to know that this gets to be a part of this too. It's good stuff. It's and giving ourselves the permission. I think that's a huge piece to the puzzle, is saying yes to the thing that might not feel so comfortable, to move through that stagnancy to then make more spaciousness for some other place, to find some fluidity, right? Like it all gets
Yeah.
to be a part of it. We're nature, and so as a part of being nature, we're ecologically like a part of this co-creation that's constantly like moving. Our cells are changing, and it's fun to think about, and it's also fun to just feel into.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think about nature and, I was thinking about I had this visualization of a leaf falling from a tree, right? And so it's fall and envisioning this leaf, and it's green and it's up there. And then like one day it's bright yellow, and then one day it's bright red and it's orange, right? And then eventually it falls and like delicately dances to the floor and feeds the tree that it came from. And it does so unabashedly. I'm definitely not unabashedly me. I try to permission that. And so how can we step in into unabashedly expressing our love and our divinity and our joy and sharing our gifts and not making ourselves small. You know, I have these antlers behind us, and elk have been a huge teacher for me, and I've learned a lot about what it is, how I conceptualize what it is to be a man from spending so much time with elk. And a bull elk with a big set of antlers doesn't hide his antlers, but he also doesn't flaunt them. He takes the space that he needs. But also then in the early winter when it's time to shed them, he's not like holding on to them. He's like, oh, okay. And just like lets that part of him die. And so when I walk into these spaces, and this is, you know, we're in this weird time right now where to be a man feels like public enemy number one in a way. And there's so many valid reasons and so much work to do because of the you know, injuries that have come from men, so that I don't want to take away or diminish that in any way, shape, or form. But I don't believe that we need to exist in a world where masculinity doesn't exist. I think that we need to exist in a world where we can see the divinity and the sacredness and the gift that masculinity is, and balance that with the divinity and sacredness and gift that the feminine is within each of us as sovereign divine individuals. And I'm seeing a trend where a lot of men, you know, seem to be, you know, we grow up and we cast away our feminine side. And now we're being told, well, your masculinity is also not acceptable. And so we're not allowed to embrace our feminine. Now we have to unembrace the masculine that we've been, and, you know, not necessarily healthy masculine always, that we've been conditioned into. So now what's there? Now it's just a shell that's been told to deny your feminine and your masculine. So that's just like a dumpster fire in a way, you know, psychically, spiritually, like none of who I am is allowed to exist. And the amount of shame that comes with that is pretty unbearable. And so I'm trying to relearn. I have these antlers, like I'm gonna stand with my head high in love, in rapture, in service to this heaven that I live in every day, even though sometimes it's hard for me to see. And I'm going to fall down and I'm going to screw up and I'm going to have a hard day and I'm going to be short and I'm going to miss it and I'm going to not listen and I'm going to say something off. And I'm going to give myself grace and I'm going to ask for forgiveness and I'm going to own it. And I'm going to step through that threshold again and again. Because to not is to live in hell. And I know what it's like to live in hell. I spent a lot of time there. And I also know that there's untold hordes of men that are alone and in hell who don't have the money, who don't have the connections, who don't have the privilege, who don't have the resources, who don't have any clue where to start. And that goes back to this men's work of like, I don't know either. I don't think I'm some expert in any of this. All I know is that I lived in hell for a long time. Now I pretty much live in heaven every day. And I didn't have hope before, and I have hope now. And so like my plea, my cry to men, my offering is like, I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to you. You're the only one that knows the answer. But I'll walk by your side, and I'm willing to share what I've learned. And like encouragement and permission to set down that armor, to take that step. Like, all right, we're at the edge of this crevasse and the world needs us more than ever. I wrote about this recently, and I was at an ayahuasca retreat, and the facilitator, who was this just beautiful, this lovely woman that just held the most immaculate space for a group of men, and recognizing that like women have been doing the bulk of the work. Women have been carrying this torch and keeping femininity alive and intuition alive and holding space for men for so long. And when men don't show up, women carry it all. What she said is like, when men don't show up, women work double, but really I think it's like work like 1,000-fold. And so if I can show up and hold space for these men and walk by their side and love them when their armor's down and their chest isn't puffed out, and invite them into this new story with me, every single one that says yes just like fills my heart. I'm endlessly dumbfounded and in awe and inspired by and filled with hope by all of these men that are saying yes to this new story, and who are learning to like hold their heads high in a new and beautiful way that is from a place of devotion instead of domination.
I feel like,
and that's my dream. That's the more beautiful future I want to call it.
Here for it. Devotion and over dominance. I think that's wow. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And when women can feel held and safe by friends, partners, brothers, fathers, that is a changed world. That is a changed world.
The men's group recently finished reading The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, which for anybody who hasn't read it, it's stunning and heartbreaking and perfect. And it speaks so much to how unsafe it feels for women to be around men, and how heartbreaking that is, because there's this deep knowing that, we need men. We just need them to be safe men. And it's incredible how nuanced it is. I mean, even, around my partner, like, don't stand in front of her when she's in a corner because it's scary for her to feel blocked in, even though she's safe with me. Like, somatically, that feels scary. All these little nuanced ways. And I hear a lot of men preach like, oh, well, I'm a safe man. Okay. Great. That's good. How are you showing up today? Like, because there's so many layers and there's so much work to do. And I believe that, like, I don't know, like, starting with our own partners and starting with ourselves, but starting with our own partners, like, if we could be generally safe, that's lovely. If we could love one partner really, really exquisitely well so that they felt safe with us, then that creates space for that inner healing to happen within them. Not saying that we as men have power over that, but again, back to that foundation of safety, like we can't heal if we're not safe. So if we're not in a safe partnership, we can't heal in that partnership, right? And so just starting there and creating that little vortex, that little opportunity of collective healing, right? And then stepping into our soul family, our dearest friends, and learning to love each other and feel safe in that space, right? That's going to be a slow process, and I'm sorry that that's what it is. That breaks my heart that we've arrived where we have, just across the board, but specifically, there's a quote out there that says like, men are afraid women are going to laugh at them, and women are afraid men are going to kill them. And in hearing that the first time and knowing how true that felt in my body, like that disparity is an unspeakable atrocity, and goes back to this work. Like, I want to support men so they can't live in hell, or so they no longer live in hell, because I know what it is to suffer alone. And by doing so, that makes the world a safer place for my daughter, my mother, my partner, you, and me. And so I think the work to do is here to like rewrite that story.
Yes.
And I thank you for trusting me, to the extent that we know each other. And that
yes,
you do.
of course. I feel, again, doing the work somatically, right? There's a different attunement that happens in your body to know who you feel safe with and who you don't, real quick.
Yeah.
There's something that happens where you're like, oh, that doesn't really feel good. So I'm not going to even give that person my attention. There's been moments where I'll be on a walk and I'm a friendly person, and yet I won't even look in that person's direction because I feel some kind of something. And I'm not going to even give any of my energetic whatever to this person. And then there's also people where I'm like, oh, that feels good. And you're definitely one of those people. So and I know so much of it is because you have done this work for yourself.
Yeah.
And in community, when you continue to show up to co-collaborate with the universe and the divine to make spaciousness for the next person, for your neighbor, for your brother, the universe will work in your favor to put the energetic force behind that next brother that says yes,
Yeah. Well, and we're herd animals, right? Like we're not meant to, and we can't do this alone. We need those mirrors. And if we're so scared within ourselves, so insecure, so unstable within ourselves, it's pretty impossible, I think, to look in a mirror without that being a real struggle. And so we end up isolated. I think that's where a lot of the isolation for men comes from. Just, I don't know. I believe that like all these relationships that we call in are like, you and I have some sort of karma, some lesson for each other that we're exquisitely situated within each other's universes to like provide that opportunity for learning and growth and healing. But again, without that foundation of internal safety, how do we breach that? Because we end up traumatizing each other. You know, if we're in chaos, and then we push each other away, and then we lose that opportunity for connection and for growth and for healing. And I don't know, like, if we have another life, we have to relive that, I guess, or something, you know, like, are we just like the same star constellation, like pulling each other in over and over and over again, until we learn to love ourselves, and then we can be done. I don't know.
But it's interesting, even you saying that. I mean, I've had some experiences where the hard thing is potentially maybe having a mirror where I got to see myself more clearly, where, you know, that person wasn't conscious potentially of their own actions. And then that gave me a deeper respect for myself to know, even if this person's rejecting me for X, Y, or Z, and they're not willing to have an open conversation because their heart is not open, that's not on me if I'm coming to the table and saying, yes, I still want relationship. I still want healing. And then what does it look like to then go back to the table and the altar for yourself to say, okay, even if this person doesn't love me or doesn't see me, more importantly, they can't see me, I can see myself more clearly. So there's also this like, it's just an interesting dance that we have with our constellations that I do really believe that they're just these cycles. We choose these different bodies, but oof, some fascinating stuff.
Yeah. It's, you know, those really difficult interactions just feel like hard opportunities to keep our hearts open, right? Like, something that I've realized recently that is a shadow is I have a really hard time seeing my gifts. Like, as you know, many people we have some overlapping communities, so many just exquisitely talented, brilliant people. And I'm like, oh, I don't have any gifts. Like, I'm not like writing beautiful songs or this or, whatever. So it's that self-judgment comes in, but, the most challenging, So I realized that one of the things that I do, I have sort of like golden lab energy. Like, I just want to love on people endlessly, which is a gift. And I'm trying to own that as a gift. But I realized that in those moments of vulnerability where I feel like, where my fear gets in play, maybe I've been rejected or felt rejected from somebody because they had a rough day, or, they didn't respond to a text message or something. I double down on that love. And I'm like, here, let me love you even more. And it's this shadow, it's this fear sense of needing to feel secure in that relationship. But in doing that, I then smother those people and push them away. And so in some ways I can be grateful for that, like, rejection, because I don't have to reject. It's an opportunity for me to not reject myself and to witness that tendency to reject myself and jump into those shadowy bits of me that would ultimately actually harm that relationship. Where maybe if I came back to it, they're like, man, I had what a day I had yesterday. Sorry for being far away. I'm like, but like, there's that song, like, you probably think that song is about you, that, and like, we're our egos are just like, oh, this is me. And like, well, is it really? But it is an opportunity for us to learn in those stickier relationships, for me, like sticky relationships with my parents, or my children's mom is a very challenging one. Those are opportunities for me to learn to love myself more and to give more compassion and more grace. And so in that way, I can be grateful, even though it's really trying. So I don't think I don't think it's necessary that others be, open. There's still lessons there. Um, if if we can get out of our own heads, just to be open to receiving them, which is hard to do
That's the practice. No,
for me.
same. You and I, it's
Yeah,
funny talking to you today. I'm like, we sound a lot alike. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of
yeah,
resonance there. That's been something that I've karmically come to the understanding that that's something I had to learn in this lifetime. And I feel like I've really deeply come into that this year and last year, like knowing that the secure attachment starts here and it's not dependent on somebody else and how they respond. One of my favorite books is The Four Agreements, and one of the agreements is to not take things personally. And it's like, that is easier said than done. Easier said than done. That is a hard one. And our ego wants to make everything about us, but it's like, stop taking yourself so seriously. It's not all about you. Like, that person has their own karma that they're navigating through. And oftentimes what you're seeing is the mirror of how you're making that person feel. And it's like this thing, and to get out of our heads, but just to like drop into how we feel and know that we're safe regardless of how any person responds at the end of the day. I mean, it's hard. It's hard work, and it's a practice for sure.
but it's a litmus test for self-love,
Yes.
right? Because I can be like, oh, I'm so, I love myself, but if I fully loved myself, I don't think that I actually need somebody else to love me. I mean, that would be
1000%.
lovely, right?
Yeah.
But like, but it is a litmus test of like, oh, I'm actually feeling unworthy of being loved right now. I'm feeling my unworthiness because of this rejection. What parts of myself am I still judging as unworthy? And yeah, it's a journey. And you talked about this resonance between us, but I think that sentiment resonates with almost everybody that I talk to. um, Permissioning our own self-love, and really feeling it, allowing it, and treating it like our most precious relationship. um it's hard. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's,
and it's sweet to know that I'm not walking
no,
the
you're
path
not.
alone.
And I wanted to ask, so men that are interested can know, what do
Yeah,
your gatherings for Mandate look like? I know that they're probably different every single time, but just so you could just share, what could someone look forward to if they
yeah,
joined you for a Mandate session gathering?
yeah. Thanks for asking. So, um, that is, you're right, it does vary. We have a couple standard formats. We meet online 3 Mondays a month from 6 to 8 p.m., the first, second, and fourth Monday of every month. On the first Monday, we do a focus discussion. And so sometimes we'll bring in a guest. Next month, we're bringing in Tiff, for who's our sweet mutual friend Tiff, who's a somatic therapist, to talk about trauma in the body. Last month we had a sex therapist come in and talk about pleasure and shame. We've had lots of very specific topical discussions like that, not always with facilitators, but on all sorts of different topics impacting men. And then on the second, fourth Monday of every month, we hold a council circle, which really is an opportunity for us to witness men however they're showing up, and try to keep an open heart and try to really practice listening. I think that's the gift for the participants in a big way. And then the other part of it is you got to practice being vulnerable and being witnessed. And so that's um, trying to stay out of story and in our hearts about what we're feeling, what's going on for us, what we need, or maybe how we need to be acting differently. And so really teasing apart those things in a community of men who's choosing to show up and support and witness each other and to provide guidance. And separate from that, we do book readings. We've read several books. The one I spoke to earlier, The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, is the last one. We've read King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and a handful of others, and ongoing book reviews therein. We've gone to an ayahuasca retreat together. We every summer, we've been doing this for 2 years now. So the last 2 summers, myself and the 2 other men on the leadership team have facilitated a summer retreat. And then lots of other opportunities. We really wanted to be a community. So, I mean, we've had like I rock climb. So we've had like climb night, or, hey, we're all going to go out to dinner together. But when we're going into those spaces, we're permissioning and encouraging people to show up fully and honestly with an open heart. So it's not like, let's go drink some beer and, watch football. It's like, hey, we're gathering intentionally to foster a beautiful future where we're not alone. And also it's an evolving creature. I don't have much attachment to what it looks like. And so there's new opportunities all the time, and it's just tapping into whether something feels like a yes or a no, and rolling with it and learning together. Again, I don't think I'm some expert in this. I don't have a PhD. I'm just a guy that needs it and couldn't find it for myself. So I created it, and it's just flowed since then. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I think I'd also love to hear how people can find you, how people can know where to go so they can join Mandate, and any more places that they can find you to potentially work with you. I know you also do one-on-one mentorships as well.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So the Mandate website's mandatepdx.com. The men's group is free or by donation. That's a new thing that we're starting. We've got about 40 members right now, and it's just requiring more and more time and bringing in guests and stuff. So, but it's free to any man that's courageous enough to say yes. And always will be. And then working with me in a mentorship setting, you can reach out. My information's on the men's group website, or you can find me at mr.andrew.riggs on Instagram and reach out there. So the website's got my email and my phone number. And just always excited to walk side by side with men as they step forward into this new future. And I struggle going to work every day because I'm like, this is like 40 hours a week that I can't spend doing what my heart really wants to do, which is support men and carry this new story forward. So
putting the prayer out there that it can become full-time for you. I believe that your passion will become, it will become that for sure. Especially, you can see yourself light up as you share how this is.
Yeah, no, it's the most important thing I do, other than my own self-work. You can't help others if you're not grounded in your own practices.
Definitely.
So,
definitely. And one final question. If you had one slice of wisdom to share from your own life experience that has helped you through your path, what would it be?
What a question. Let me sit with that for a second here. What I want to say feels almost like a prayer. And that is that there is hope. Like there really, really is a tremendous amount of hope. And it's the stories that need to be shed that are blocking our ability to see it. It's our pain, it's our wounding, it's our, getting distracted by the noise and the gadgets and the screens and the social media and the politics and all of that, right? Those are blinders. And living in a world that feels hopeless is a really dire life to live. And the only thing in our way from finding that hope is saying yes to doing the work. At whatever pace it arises and in whatever way our intuition tells us. It's just saying yes. Hope is on the other side of that yes. And we have to say it over and over and over again. And when we do, and I don't want to speak for others, but in saying yes, I've began to see that glimmer, and that glimmer has grown. And so it's an invitation for any man, whether you want to come hang out at a men's group or find a different one or start your own or whatever, like we need you desperately to say yes.
Thank you so much. That was so beautifully shared and expressed. Thank you for tapping in. I could feel it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you.
thank you for being a witness to this work and for then sharing it with others. It's felt. It's deeply felt. And I feel fortunate to live in Portland to be able to know other men that share space with you and that are doing this work to then have that ripple out.
Yeah. Thanks for witnessing it. It's in some ways it's hard for me to see, or maybe I see it, but I don't want to claim it. So I really appreciate just the reminder.
I think it's good not to claim it.
Slowly letting
Yeah, I
it
think it's good to, I think it's wise of you and humble of you to not claim it and yet hold it, which you do so beautifully.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Acknowledge also though. Acknowledge the energy and the effort and the intention.
Yeah.
Because you're putting that in.
Yeah.
So acknowledge that for yourself, please. Thank you so much for your honesty, for your vulnerability, and for your compassion, and for really doing the work to create a new paradigm. That's what we need here. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, right, we're all doing this together, and the more we get to share space and learn and see and witness, the more we grow into that community that we desperately need, and it takes all of our gifts. So thank you for all the ways that you show up beautifully and courageously and uniquely you, because it's just such a delight to get to witness and to interact with. So thanks for inviting me into your precious space here and for sharing your heart.
Thank you, Andrew. All the love.
Hey there, it's Danae again. Just wanted to say thank you for sharing your time and energy with me. If this podcast resonates, please like, subscribe, follow, and share if you're willing. Reviews help too, so if you're feeling the vibe, please leave a review where you can. Sending all the love. Peace.